All right, Matthew chapter 26, starting in verse 36. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And taking with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." And going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, for the second time, he went away and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Sleep and take your rest later on. See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." And since that's a section break for me, I think that's good enough to spot right there. All right, so this was the Matthew's narrative here, and he was just finishing talking about, that Peter and the other disciples said, "I will not deny you," that kind of thing. It's interesting that. So this is just a continuation of this event, I should say. All right. Gethsemane. I don't know why. I thought it was interesting that the word Gethsemane means oil press or olive press. So it's a pressure thing there. Yeah. Gethsemane is within the Mount of Olives area. It is not like here's Gethsemane and then 30 miles away here's Mount of Olives. They're just all bundled together in that same area there. That's about all I understand and know about Gethsemane, other than that there's hardly any olive trees left in Gethsemane area. It's mostly buildings and parking lots now, so that's what's there today. So Jesus goes and takes Peter, James, and John, right? Peter and the sons of Zebedee, or the sons of thunder.
Sons of thunder.
I don't know where I got that from, but I've heard that name forever. And I guess some of my puzzling questions are, why did he do this? Why did he go to Gethsemane to pray? I know the good Bible answer is, well, it's because that's what you do when you're a Christian. You go and you pray. But why? Why this area? And why just bring 3 of them and not the whole group, the whole clan with you? And then when you did bring them, why did you go off by yourself and have them watch and pray? What's going on here? There's got to be something.
He had all the disciples with him, and then he took just 3 further.
Yeah.
And then he left them and he went further.
Further. So it just seems a little odd to me. I want you to come here with me, but yet I want you to stay over there while I go here. Mm-hmm. What were they watching for? I guess maybe ask it that way. Because there's no been.
It's a way of having them simply participate or be in solidarity of
Maybe
what
so.
he's doing for them and recognize it.
Yeah.
And
I don't think it's like being put on guard duty or anything like that. Because at this moment, I didn't think there was any real.
I think it'd be more like support.
Support, yeah.
And maybe also for their sake to be involved at some level and see firsthand at some level.
Is there, usually what Jesus does is almost always about a lesson being taught and something being learned about the event that Jesus is doing. Some strange thing. So, I do this so that, you guys will understand the cost of discipleship or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a lesson out of this? I mean, other than for us, of course, praise the Lord, but I wish Matthew had said something.
Well, I mean, this whole incident, once again, I think shows the human side of Jesus, and to the fact that he knew it was coming, right? So he sees the train a coming. I mean, he sees it's it's the scrolls unrolling now, right? And I think there's a human side of it that takes effect here, where in fact he asked the Father, if this doesn't have to happen, if it can happen another way, I'm cool with that, right?
Yeah.
And I think the whole thing with taking the three with him, which I guess from my reading and from what I've heard, these are the three inner core.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
These are his
that's what
buddies, right? These are his ones that he's closer to than
That's what I
the
understand.
rest of the group, right? So
Correct.
he takes them, I think, like you said, Steve, for support. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to pray. To me, it's like, can this go another way?
Yeah, I think it's kind of dangerous for us in Scripture to read it, what I would call in linear fashion, in other words, or sequential. He didn't become sorrowful, as it says in 37. He began to be sorrowful at 37.
Right.
I think he was beginning to be sorrowful even at the point of, hey, you guys are all going to deny me. The scroll is unrolling, as you phrased
Right.
it, starting to realize the full impact of what's going on here.
Right.
So with that thought of being sorrowful, he needed other support, other people to go with him.
Yeah, because if you remember, I mean, there are different times in his ministry too where he felt sorrowful, right? The rich young ruler? It said when he turned
walked
away,
away.
and Jesus he said he was sorrowful
I think so, yeah.
for him making that decision, and so there are times when he was distressed or sorrowful or whatever,
Right.
and I think this is just one of those times where the human that he was man. And that it comes out into the fact that he's about to face something horrible,
Right.
and he knows exactly what's coming.
It's interesting that not but a few months ago, Corey preached a sermon on this, or he brought out a point a little different than I had ever thought about. I've always thought about when Jesus was on the cross was when he felt that lowest, most separated from God.
Right.
But Corey pointed out that no, it started right here.
Yeah.
When he said these words,
Yeah.
that's when he took on that separation and just, that deep sorrow.
Right.
It was right here. It wasn't necessarily, he wasn't even on, it was now.
Right.
Right.
This was when it happened.
Right.
So that was an interesting point.
Yeah. So yeah, and it makes sense because here he is. He's asking God, can it go another way? And,
Right.
and basically answers no. This is what has to happen.
Yeah.
So he understands it.
On one hand, he is dreading it, and on the other hand, he's willingly doing it
Yes.
at the same time. It would be like you doing something for your family or your children that you dread doing.
Right.
But at the same time, you're willing and more than willing.
It's
Yeah.
got to get done. Right.
Yeah.
So 38, he states it out loud about my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me. And so he goes a little further, and he fell on his face and prayed, saying, okay, so right here I'm a little confused. And it more is just a pragmatic question more than anything else, I think. How do we know this is what he said?
Because it's in red.
Bam. Okay. That's the end of it. It just seems a little bit. I'm not challenging as it's not true. Just how did Matthew get these words that that's what he said? Was he maybe not so far away that Peter, James, and John
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
still heard it?
Yeah.
Maybe you just answered on why he took them.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
No,
not
that
only
could be
for
a
his
very
Or maybe
support-
great point.
Not only for his
Yeah.
support,
Great
but
point.
it's
For their
the
lesson.
lesson.
Yeah. Yeah, that when you know you're doing God's will,
Yeah.
it's not easy.
Hmm.
And especially if you know the consequences of those.
Right.
That would be anything from you not participating in an office function because you know it's not what a Christian does.
Right.
But you know that if you don't participate in it, your odds of staying at the company are short-lived, for example. I know I've been faced with that several times, with having to make those decisions and just take the chance. I mean, of course, my situation isn't near
Right.
anything like
No.
this, but it certainly is the same kind of lesson here, I think. Yeah, so I'm going to go with they eavesdropped, and this is what they heard. Matthew says this is what they heard. He gets into another one that I have a question on. I'm just full of questions on this whole section. It says, my Father, this is what, 39? My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. What cup?
I did see something that said that term is used in the Old Testament.
Yeah, a lot.
To mean wrath.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
God's
that may-
cup of wrath.
So that's probably the answer, is just that term, meaning some kind of wrath.
Right.
Think about it, in Revelation, there's a bowl of wrath too.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Almost every time that this phrase, God's cup,
Hmm.
refers to a wrath or a reckoning
Right.
about to be poured out.
Right. The pouring out.
Right.
Yeah.
Of it, is what that is. So this cup is not, on the surface, the same kind of cup that is in the Lord's Supper,
Yeah.
right? This is a different kind of idea here.
Yeah, symbolic.
Right, exactly. He does say, but nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. It's, I think, one of the most amazing statements is that.
Yeah, that's true. That kind of, that's the pivot point right there.
I think so too. I think it's, for me, it's the lesson. That's what God wants me to do, is
Yeah.
to get to that point that it's not my will,
Right.
but your will.
It's the Great Commission.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it is doing His will above what I desire for
Right.
myself.
Right.
You know, it's the point. I mean, it's the difference that the death, burial, and resurrection makes in your life, because I know in us, it's impossible to make that statement and live out that statement without the Holy Spirit. Right? We
Right.
can't do it as
No.
Right.
unregenerated people. That statement cannot be made,
Right.
right? So,
Yep.
And it's showing his humanity and divinity all in the same
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
phrase.
So he said that prayer. Obviously, there was no magic light or thunder or any kind of
Parting of the
response,
clouds.
parting of the clouds, or anything that we would typically glean as an answer, right? It's almost like the silence, which is a lot of times in our prayer, when we're asking God like this or that, there is no response. And a lot of the younger Christians don't understand that. They expect an answer.
Right.
I prayed for this. God didn't do it. Therefore, whatever. God's not real, or God doesn't
Right.
care, and we glean to those answers. But here, what is actually what Jesus do, other than goes back to these guys and says, "Hey, keep on watching, praying." He does it 3 more times, or 2 more times, I should say. It's 3 times that Jesus goes back to pray, basically the same thing, all 3 times. One commentator said this was an example of how we should be praying. Is you just keep pressing until you're aligned with God. I think is the way one commentator said it, which I really like. It's, the fallacy of prayer sometimes is that we want to change God's mind and heart.
Mm-hmm.
God, I want you to do this. No answer. God, I want you to do this. No answer. As opposed to, God, what is your will that I can see your will and change my prayer more than change God's response.
Change their heart.
Right, change our heart here. And I think that's a great example of that here. Is it interesting to you, as it is to me, that Matthew didn't record their response to the question? He came and found them sleeping. So could you not watch with me 1 hour? And Peter, James, or John to come up with some kind of cool answer like, I don't know, the wine was a little heavy this time. Sorry, I was just a little tired. Or anything. Matthew didn't record any of that.
No. Or it's kind of like maybe it didn't need a response. It was more like a scolding or a reprimand.
Right.
Than it was a question.
Yeah. Left them speechless maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of like you asking your children.
Why'd you
not
do
looking
that?
for a response.
Right.
It's really more it's a correction
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, that's a
or
good
a
point.
challenge.
Yep. Yep. And maybe there's just the English conversion here that makes it easier for us to understand from one language to the other. But he then turns around and says, watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. What temptation? The temptation of falling asleep? I don't know either. I honestly don't. I don't know unless the word temptation has another better, clarifying word to that.
Unless he's just speaking in temptation in general,
Right.
right? That you may not enter into temptation where the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak. No, is this another lesson?
Right. Interesting that my dictionary on the word temptation, the primary definition of it, which I never would have thought this actually, a desire to do something. I will always thought, because I've been inside the Baptist church for so long, temptation always meant sin. Temptation to sin, right? But here, it's not about necessarily sinning, but about a desire to do something. Especially something wrong or unwise type of thing. But I do find it cool that the next sentence, the spirit that Jesus affirms, the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's got us written all over it, in my opinion. I mean, that's kind of like our battle cry.
Yeah,
Yes.
that helps explain temptation.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we want to fall back. We want to just take it easy, not put the effort in to certain things.
We're all vulnerable.
We're all vulnerable to that. Just earlier on, I'm not going to deny you, but as that spirit is really strong, willing, but our flesh is very weak.
That's right.
Is that a good excuse?
No, it's not an excuse. It's a fact.
Yeah, as I like to tell people, this is not an excuse. This is a reason.
That's right.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, because I'm not trying to get out of it. This is what it is. Okay.
And the other thing you need to look at is, Jesus going and praying and asking God to remove this cup from him could also be, that's the flesh speaking,
Right.
right?
Right.
Spiritually, he was willing to do, he was willing to, he was going to lay down his life, but yet here's the flesh that's screaming, I don't want to go through this if I don't have to, right? So
That
it's,
may be why it's 3 times.
exactly, right? because he knew what was coming. So could very well just
And
It's
so,
like doing the right thing,
Right.
but it's a tough pill to swallow.
right. I mean, because once again, I think he goes back to the thing that he was fully God and fully man.
yeah,
And how could, if he's fully man, how could he not experience
the fear of
the fear of the
Physical
death?
pain.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Right.
I'm sorry at this moment, I just got to express how much gratitude I have towards Christ
Yeah.
in this. I mean,
Yeah.
to,
Carry our dead of sin.
yeah, to see this going through here. So 42, he says, and for the second time. He went away and prayed. My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done. Same thing, but still asking that big question that was there. If this cannot pass, there's that if, there's that hope or that possibility of another way. Steve, I think it's memory, hopefully, 2 Corinthians. I think it's chapter, I'm trying to get to it. I just want to make sure I got it. Yeah, 2 Corinthians chapter 5. I think it's like 20 or 21.
Right. 20. Therefore, we are ambassadors of Christ. God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ to be reconciled. And 21.
Yeah, 21.
For our sake, he made him to be sin, who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God.
Yeah, that's
Let
the.
him be sin who knew no sin.
Yeah, this is the realization that he's taken all of sin upon him, not the sin of anyone who confesses Christ. He didn't take a select group of people's sins. He took the world's sin on it. And I think that's part of this realization of of what's happening about this cup, knowing I'm about to take all of the world's sins. I mean, that's the sins of Howard. That's the sins of the worst person you can think of, Adolf Hitler. I don't know. He's taken all of those sins. Gobsmacked, I guess is the word I'm thinking of here.
Yeah, and the result of taking on that sin, right, is separation.
Yeah, complete.
Complete separation from the Father.
Yeah.
The worst possible wrath that I could think of is to be separated from God.
Yeah. Which, it actually is the definition of death.
Yes, it's a separation, right? Yeah, absolutely. And again, he came back and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. I was curious about something.
One thing about 42 in comparison to, maybe this is just the way mine reads, comparison to 39. In 39 he says, my Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me, right?
Mhm.
In other words, he's asking.
Right.
In 42 he says, my Father, if this cannot pass away unless I drink it, thy will be done. So it's almost like in 42 it's a coming to realization that he's starting to get the answer.
Right.
Right. As opposed to, hey, if you can do something about this, do it another
Right.
way. And the second one is, well, if it's not going to pass, then your will be done.
Right.
You know?
That's that morphine of of your prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
As
Yeah.
you're getting
That's a
more
great word.
aligned with God,
Yeah.
you're morphing that. Yeah.
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 45, and then came the disciples and said to them, sleep and take your rest later on. What?
Well, mine reads differently.
Does it?
Mine says, are you still sleeping and taking your rest?
Mm. I am puzzled. I will tell you about these guys. and it may still be about the spirit willing and the flesh is weak, and it could be late. But you would think that they should be aware that something significant is happening or is about to happen. I don't know. Maybe I'm the same way, really, in my walk. There are times I'm just asleep in my Christian walk. You know, the Lord has told me to do, to do this or that, and I kind of just go through the motions, if you will. I just take things easy on my walk. I don't know, maybe I'm pulling too much out of that. I don't know. It just, I'm just honest. I just don't know what the lesson is here for us on these sleeping three.
3 times.
Yeah. 3 times 3 people. Yeah. But we get to the transition in 45, which is see the hour is at hand. And then his self-designation, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of the sinners.
Ready or not, sleeping or not, God's providential plan comes
The hour is at
along
hand.
and takes place.
Right. Yeah.
So suddenly,
Yeah.
this part of his plan, it was time and it took place whether they were asleep at the wheel or not.
Right. And then the last phrase, the last verse, 46, he's kind of like waking them up, I would imagine, because he says, see the hour is at hand, rise, in 46, rise, let us be going, see my betrayers at hand. I can just imagine the 3 sleepy guys trying to rub sleep out of their eyes, looking around, and Jesus is telling them, my betrayer is at hand. Like, what did I miss? What's going on here?
Right.
I could honestly see a lot of confusion.
And interestingly, instead of them alerting him to run,
Right,
it was
yeah.
him notifying them it's time, and
Yeah.
here it is.
Yeah.
This next step's fixing to take place.
Yeah.
And
Feels so
still,
backwards.
It's gonna happen.
Right? Wow.
But I think it's also him being willing to face, he's gonna face his betrayer, right? In other words, he's not gonna be sitting there in prayer and they come up behind him, sneak up behind him and
Right.
grab him,
Right.
It's,
Right.
this is that, that first signal we see is that he willingly gave up his life.
Right.
He didn't run, he didn't hide, he knew they were coming, but said, it's time to go,
That's right.
they're here.
Yeah, in the next set of verses, you can clearly see that who's controlling the situation, the crowd or the mob or the group of people that are coming, or is it him that's actually
Right.
controlling the situation?
Right.
Who's in control, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This isn't a, oh my gosh, I didn't realize what's happening kind of thing.
Yeah.
He's in
Yeah.
control. The hour's at hand. It's time to go. All right, we're going to stop here
All right.
on it. What are you guys praying for?